Oddjob, an arm and a leg. Rick uses his bladed hat to cut off Homesteader Rick's arm. I will at least admit it, Rick, a homesteader and former chief Morty-cloning scientist at the Citadel, is quite honest about his lack of moral character. Rick simply replies that he never claimed to be a good man when Arcade Morty learns about his background and starts ranting at him aggressively. He also admits that he is just as wicked as them, but at least he has the self-awareness to be ashamed of how awful they are all, immediately before he builds the enormous Morty clone to assault the clone Ricks, whom he also helped create. Homesteader Rick, the child is correct. None of you are better than me. I simply despise myself for it. The Atoner, one of the main perpetrators of the Citadel's terrible system of mass-producing Mortys as expendable clones, is Homesteader Rick, who is downplayed but present because it is revealed that he was the original Citadel's chief scientist in charge of Morty cloning. The Arcade it seems sense that Morty is repulsed to hear this. At this point, Homesteader Rick is only interested in living a life of solitude and peace. He is not actively working to assist or improve the lives of the clones he created. His attack on the Rick clone's new Citadel is solely motivated by retaliation and has nothing to do with rescuing the Morty clones they abducted. However, it's clear that Rick feels a great deal of guilt and self-loathing over the part he played. In contrast to the clone Ricks, Rick does not consider the Morty clones to be less than human, and he never intentionally harms or mistreats them. In the end, he assists Arcade Morty in saving them and makes a redemption equals death last stand to allow them to flee and resume their lives. A bittersweet conclusion. In addition to saving his companions, Arcade Morty and Homesteader Rick are able to kill the invaders and destroy the proto-Citadel, killing Ricks inside. Homesteader Rick perishes during his last stand even though Arcade Morty's buddies are able to find new homes and purposes. To put an end to the Citadel Rick's menace, he performed a taking you with me on Big Rick. Furthermore, even if Arcade Morty is at last safe and free, the incidents have left him devastated and worn out. Bookends. The episode opens with a bored Morty playing with a fidget spinner. He and Rick return to the planet to retrieve it after Morty dropped it there, and the show concludes with him playing with it once more. Borrowed biometric bypass. Arcade Morty unlocks the prison cell where the Mortys are housed by using a biometric scanner and a dead Rick's hand. Callback, several to the earlier Citadel episodes, of course. The main plot point of this episode is the revelation from Rick Morty Jack that the Citadel mass-produced Morty clones. As the protagonists come to a Morty town constructed by some of them who survived the collapse of the Citadel, we also discover that a significant number of Rick clones were also produced. The only non-clone among the antagonistic Ricks trying to construct a new Citadel is Homesteader Rick, who is a clone who has developed an inferiority-superiority complex toward natural-born versions of himself. The opening of Solaricks also discusses the portal reset, in which Rick C-137 unintentionally reset portal passengers and transported them all back to their original universes. Rick tells Morty that the reset sends all of the clones back to the Citadel's dimension because they were all made there. The shift from following the main Rick and Morty to one of their variations is similar to the Ricklantes mix-up, which this episode is somewhat of a sequel to. The two run into different incarnations of themselves. Morty shows interest in them or something they said, and Rick brushes it off as unimportant. Morty, what's the matter with that guy? Rick, Morty, knowing is the worst thing I can think of. After that, the show shifts to following Homesteader Rick and revealing his true motivation. Chair reveal, 2 employees, Mortys, turn Big Rick around in his chair as he is unveiled. Big Rick's, get yo mouth round it, is his catchphrase. Given that he was cloned to serve as a Gumbo restaurant's mascot chain, this is most likely the restaurant's tagline. At the end, Homesteader Rick gives him the same response before demolishing the early Citadel. Characterization: the main characters Rick and Morty are played for laughs in the end. Rick says he's matured enough to own up to his faults, which Morty commends him for, but both of them ignore the terrified Arcade Morty in the background. Gunman by Chekhov, a small illustration. Arcade Morty converses with another Morty named Doc. When Homesteader Rick enters the Mortytown arcade, we only hear his voice off-screen. Doc, who has hitched a ride aboard Homesteader Rick's truck, is the only other Morty save Arcade Morty who escapes being abducted by trafficker Ricks. Save their companions. Doc doesn't get to do much before he passes away, though, as he gets shot dead rather early in the rescue effort. Although he is obviously remorseful of it now, Homesteader Rick appears to be just a hillbilly recluse who wants to be left alone. However, we, as well as Arcade Morty, learn later that he is not only the only Rick in the room who isn't a clone, but that he was also one of the Ricks responsible for producing the Morty clones that the Citadel mass-produced.